Hey guys, this is Tyler from analytive.com, and today I'm going to talk about my experience on the ski slopes this past weekend and how failure makes you better. This is Tyler, and you are listening to the Analytive Podcast. Hey guys, what's up? It's Tyler with analytive.com, and I am so excited to talk about today's topic. And today, I get to talk to you about failure. Failure is something that I don't love. I don't know anybody who really truly loves failure, but it's something that I'm really passionate about. Um, and I think in my life, like growing up, I hadn't really failed at that many things. And I don't mean that to sound arrogant. In fact, I think in some ways it was a handicap, right? But like I was always like pretty good in school. Like I got good grades and have to work that hard. Like once in a while I get a B on a test. But like school and everything that came with it was normally pretty easy for me. Same thing with, getting a job. Like, there were frustrations when I would apply to different jobs and things. But by and large, like I always had employment, like was always able to get employment. Was never that big a deal. And then I decided to start my own business. And for those of you who are entrepreneurs, business owners who have ever started something, whether it's a business or a nonprofit, organization, project, whatever, you know that when you start something new, you are introduced to failure very, very, very quickly. In fact, I would say it's almost inevitable that you will bump up against failures. So for me, right around the time I started my business, I was also in the process of learning to snowboard. So originally I'm from Indiana, which if you've never been there, it's very, very flat. I think that's an understatement, right? So my only experience with skiing happened, I think, when I was probably about 5 to 8 years old, somewhere in there. My parents took me, and they don't know how to ski either. We went up to Michigan. To a little tiny ski resort. And I just, it was, from what I remember of it, which isn't that much, like it was fun kind of, but I spent more time falling down than actually doing anything else. My dad almost ran over my little brother because he didn't know how to ski either. Neither one of them did. And so, needless to say, my family was not the type of people who live on the ski slopes. So then about 5 years ago, I moved out to Colorado. And Colorado is known for skiing and snowboarding. By that point, I'd already given up on the dream to ski. At least it just didn't have a lot of interest to me. But I knew that I wanted to learn to snowboard. I saw Shaun White and all the X Games, and I was like, that's really cool. That, like, if I learn to do something, that should be it. And in fact, I wanted to learn to snowboard so badly that the first winter I was here, it was around February. I just got on Craigslist randomly one day, and I found a guy who was selling a snowboard, binding, and boots, right? So bindings are things that attach. And it was here in Colorado, here in Fort Collins, where we're based. At the time, single had some money to burn, but it was a great deal. I think it was like $125 for everything. Now, a pair of snowboard boots is $125. A snowboard could be, a couple hundred. So I called a buddy of mine and I said, hey, you know how to snowboard. I don't, but I want to learn and I want to get aboard. So will you go with me? For two reasons. One is the guy texted me his address. It was in a trailer park. So I was like, well, it'd be good to have somebody else with me. Not super concerned, but always want to be cautious. And then the second one is I don't actually know anything about snowboarding. So for me, learning to snowboard, or actually going out and buying a snowboard, meant that like I should know something about the board I was going to buy, and I knew nothing. Right, I don't know what to look for. Didn't know anything about the camber or thickness or anything like that. So I called my buddy. We hopped in his car. We drove out to this trailer park where this guy is. Knock on his door. Super super nice gentleman. Had a little shed out behind, one of those little like red barn mini sheds. Opened it up. The snowboard was hanging there. Boots were there. So I tried on the boots. Everything was in really good condition. And so I said, okay, we'll take it. I gave him $125 and I came home. And that was my first time ever even really touching a snowboard. Like I never even touched one before. It was the first time that I bought one. So, immediately tried it on. It said, this can't be that hard, right? I'll watch some YouTube videos and figure out how to do it. So then over the next 2 years, I only went probably 2 or 3 times a year. I didn't go that much. So I kind of got a feel of the lay of the land. But I will not lie, it was one of the most frustrating things that I've ever done. Every year our church takes a trip up to Steamboat Springs, Colorado. So I did that one. and I worked with a lot of people who were also new, so I wasn't the only one who was new. But I just remember it being so very, very, very frustrating, right? Getting on the board, just not knowing how to turn, not knowing how to stop, falling, hitting my head, catching an edge, and getting flung off the board, like all kinds of stuff. And if you've ever learned to ski or snowboard, it's a challenging process. But then a turning point happened. So I got to know some friends who were actually very, very avid skiers and snowboarders. And so this was around, 2018 today? So around 2015, I bought my first season pass. So by this point, I'd already been going a few times here and there, but was still, I'd say bad, right? Very bad to very bad in my actual abilities. And so around 2015, though, I got a season pass. And the first few times, again, super, super frustrating. But so that season, I went all in all, right, around 22 times total. And by the 7th or 8th time, like it was starting to click. And I know some people it happens faster. I don't know, maybe I'm a slow learner. But by the 7th or 8th time, I started to get it, right? I just started to get it, and you start to feel. And for those of you who ski or snowboard or, anything outdoors, mountain bike, you just understand like the adrenaline and the focus and just the joy of actually going down a mountain or going down a hill and riding on top of a snowboard. Like it's so addicting. But the reason that I got better, because I was reflecting on it, and I was like, man, like why was that? And the reason that I got better was I was constantly going with people who were better than I was. Like these guys had been going, some of them since they were kids. I mean, they would go through trees, they would hit jumps, they would do everything. And I would, of course, try and follow them and usually fail, right? I would usually crash, I would usually burn. It would not be a good thing. But the thing is, I always got back up. So fast forward to this past weekend. Now I would say I'm, probably a really solid intermediate to advanced snowboarder. Like, I'll tackle just about anything without flinching. I'll still go slower than a lot of people do, but I'll make my way down just about anything you can put in front of me. But this weekend we went again with our church trip. And so it was with a bunch of the friends. So for me, it was amazing just to see in 3 years how far I'd come. I still fall. I still hit a tree, screwed up my left leg, bruised my thigh pretty bad, but it'll heal up. I'm not worried. But in the past 3 years to see how far I've come as a snowboarder, and again, if you started learning when you were 2, this isn't something that you see. And if you live in Colorado, it's also intimidating because everybody out here started learning when they were 2. Being from Indiana, it wasn't something that came naturally to me. But after our first day of skiing, so Saturday night, we were hanging out, we were having dinner with a bunch of friends, and I was talking to a few of the people who I knew loosely, but who were new to the slopes, right? This was the first time they had been on it ever, or maybe they'd gone just a few times. And I think one of the really interesting things occurred I noticed people's vocabulary, and here's what they said. They said, well, I only fell 1 time, 2 times, a few times. They would focus their the outcome of their day, right, on how few times they had fallen, on how few times they had failed. And I remember when I did that. But the thing is, the reason that I got to where I am today isn't because of how few times that I failed. It was because of how many times that I failed. Let me explain what I mean by this. The reason that I'm pretty good today is not because I only fell a few times. The reason that I'm pretty good today is because I followed people and learned and forced myself out of my comfort zone every single time I was on the board, right? Once I had mastered greens, I was instantly moving on to blues. Once I was on blues, it was blacks. Once I was on blacks, it was double blacks, and it was trees. I mean, I was doing those before I was ready, right? I was always at the edge of what I could do because I had to push myself. I had to keep up with my friends, the people that I wanted. And I got sick of being left behind, frankly. So they pushed me, right? And I fell. I mean, even this weekend, right? I was pushing myself all weekend. I probably fell more than most of the beginners, and I've been doing this a really, really long time. And I think this is what I see a lot in business is we rank our success based on how few times we failed. In some ways, I think that's kind of a goofy metric. And in some ways, if we're going to use failure as a metric, using how many times we failed as a positive thing rather than a negative thing is actually better. Now, I'm not endorsing failure. I'm not saying that we should seek to fail, that somehow we should, that failure should be glorified. I think there's risk in that, right? Like, not everybody gets an award, right? There's not participation medals here. I'm not advocating that. But what I am advocating is that when we are operating at the edge of what we know how to do, when I'm operating on a snowboard at the edge of what I know how to do, when I'm operating in business at the edge of what I know how to do, I am going to fail. It is 100% completely inevitable that I will fail. Like it just is. It just is the way that life works. So for you guys listening, I would say think about how many times you have failed. Think about how many campaigns you've launched, how many businesses you've launched, how many projects you've been a part of that have failed. And if the answer is, a few, or you're keeping score and say, well, I only failed twice, I would say maybe it's time to push a little harder. Right? Maybe it's time to push to the edge of your ability, because the reason that I'm getting better on a snowboard, and frankly, the reason, that I'm getting better in business is because I continue to fail. I don't seek to fail. I always seek to succeed, right? I don't want to crash. Crashing hurts. It does, right? Like I was going down Outlaw as a black in Steamboat this weekend, got caught up in some powder, spun out again, hit a tree with my left thigh, my left hip, was limping for a while after that. It really, really, really hurt, right? So it's not something that I would wish on anybody. But because of those failures, I'm going to be a better snowboarder. The next time I go out, I'm going to be more aggressive, right? I'm going to be able to tackle things and do turns and do jumps and do things that I've never been able to do before. It's the same thing with all the projects I'm working on right now. Every single one of our clients at Analytive, I'm grateful for. The projects that we launch that don't work, I'm grateful for. Not because they don't work, right? I want them to work. I really do. I'm not, glorifying some failure, but because I know that we're learning and we're getting closer to where we need to be, right? So whether it's on a snowboard, whether it's in business, whether it's in life, in marriage, in relationships, every failure, every challenge, right? If we let it, will push us to be better. So if you feel a little stagnant right now, I would say, I think it's time for you to start doing some more things that you're inevitably going to fail at, right? Not because failure is so great or so wonderful, but because it's a learning experience, right? It's a learning experience for you and for me. So anyways, yeah. And, if you don't snowboard, you might not understand this. But chances are it's basketball, it's a sport, it's a video game, it's whatever that thing is, right? If you think about how many times you died, right, at the beginning of playing Fortnite to where you are now, it's all those deaths and learning how to be better, right? So no matter what your thing is, I would suggest that if you are not failing, you are not at the edge of where you need to be. So maybe it's time to move. So anyway, this is Tyler. This is the Analytive Podcast. This is an episode truly from my heart, combining some of the things that I love, business, snowboarding, and an important lesson that I continue to learn every time I'm out on a snowboard. So anyways, I hope you guys are killing it today. I hope it's an amazing day for you. Go take some risks. Go push to the edge of what you know how to do, the edge of what you can do. And I will talk to you guys soon.